Welcome to the Young Indy Chroniclers, a podcast about the making of the show The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which first aired on ABC in 1992.
Kept thinking about what was Indiana Jones like as a young man. I came up with this idea of him seeing the world through the eyes of a soldier and a secret agent.
Over the course of our podcast, we're going to talk to a whole host of very talented people who either worked on this show or were there from the beginning.
We were able to shoot it on location in the real places where these events took place.
Oh, make it up as you go. Oh boy, that's great advice.
We hired some of the best European directors, a whole host of very, very talented people.
I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom.
And I'm Daniel Noah, and this is the Young Indy Chroniclers.
There's only one rule, Indiana. Stay alive.
Welcome back to the Young Indy Chroniclers, a podcast devoted specifically to the Young Indiana Jones television series and franchise. I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom, and joining me, as always, on this adventure of a lifetime is Mr. Daniel Noah.
Hello, Peter. George
Lucas and Charlie Lippincott truly pioneered the use of fan clubs for motion pictures. Harkening back to their own childhoods in the 1950s, of fan clubs directed at kids devoted to specific stars or characters, such as Roy Rogers or the Lone Ranger, the marketing department at Lucasfilm created in 1977 a fan club devoted specifically to the film Star Wars. This fan club allowed fans to feel a part of the experience through behind-the-scenes insights, gifts, and other perks. It was a smash success, not just with children, but also with adults and everyone in between. By the 1990s, this fan club had morphed into the Lucasfilm Fan Club, offering fans an inside look through a magazine and other perks into the various projects Lucasfilm was making in the late 80s and early 90s, the Young Indiana Jones TV series being one of these projects. On today's show, we're thrilled to have as a guest Mr. Dan Madsen. Dan revitalized the Lucasfilm Fan Club after a brief hiatus in the 1980s, and later founded Star Wars Insider magazine, as well as running numerous other fan clubs throughout his career, including the Star Trek Fan Club and the Lord of the Rings Fan Club. His work on the Young Indiana Jones franchise involved extensive interviews with the cast and crew, as well as writing the behind-the-scenes book for the series, which came out from Lucasfilm in 1992. Dan Madsen, thank you so much for being on our show.
Hey, thank you, Peter. I'm happy to be here.
You know, I've spoken to you a few times on other podcasts, and it's always just such a pleasure to talk to you. But for those new listeners out there who are maybe hearing you for the first time, I wonder if you could give a bit of a rundown about your own history. Your whole career has just been steeped in geekdom, which is so cool.
Yeah, I've been a geek all my life, I guess you might say. But if I did the short version of who I am in my life, I mean, it all started with Star Trek. And in 79, I saw Star Trek the motion picture, and I loved it, and started a fan club. And for that movie specifically,
travel forward with us 300 years into the future to confront the greatest mystery ever to threaten mankind. This is the return of Captain Kirk.
An alien object of unbelievable destructive power is less than 3 days away from this planet.
I'm sorry.
That you left Delta for? Or that you didn't even say goodbye?
The epic journey of the Starship Enterprise. The human adventure is just beginning. Star Trek, the motion picture.
A Gene Roddenberry production, a Robert Wise film.
I got a job in a print shop, made my newsletter look more professional. And around 1981, Paramount Studios got a hold of it and said, "Hey, you don't have a license to do this." And I said, "I know, I'm just a kid enjoying doing this, out of my mom and dad's basement." And so they said, "Well, why don't you fly out here? Let's talk to you about this and see about maybe doing an official Star Trek fan club," which they had never done one up to that point. And Gene Roddenberry, I should add, was also a big admirer of the work I was doing, and he and I had communicated many times. So when I flew out to Paramount, Gene came over to the office and he said, "This is the guy, let's have him do this." So I started with the official Star Trek fan club, and it was in about 1986 that I got a call from Lucasfilm, the head of licensing, and they said, we closed our fan club down because right now, there doesn't appear to be any new Star Wars movies coming at the moment. But they said, "We saw what you were doing with Star Trek, and we'd like to have you maybe think about doing something with Star Wars."
CBS Fox Video is proud to present a preview of the complete Star Wars trilogy.
A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away.
I want to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like my father.
An adventure unlike anything on your planet.
You're coming in too fast!
An epic of heroes and villains. The story of a boy, a girl, and a galaxy.
Long story short, got a license and a contract, and we discussed not relaunching it as the Star Wars Fan Club again because, as I said, at that time, no one knew when George would ever get back to doing Star Wars.
George Lucas, creator of the Star Wars movies, which are some of the biggest grossing films of all time, just announced that the remaining storylines are in the works.
Well, there are 9 floating around there somewhere. I'll guarantee that 3 are pretty much organized in my head. There's a lot of those up, but the other 3 are kind of out there somewhere.
So the projects that were on their plate at that point was Willow.
Heroes come in all sizes, but adventure doesn't come any bigger than this. Willow. Coming in May to a theater near you.
Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade.
I can't forget how wonderful it was.
Thank you. It was rather wonderful.
And this thing called the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, a TV series that they were planning on doing. And so I launched the fan club with those projects. We always had something Star Wars in every issue because I knew any fan of Lucasfilm was a massive fan of Star Wars. But we started with Willow, being that was the first film on their list to cover, and went over to England and spent, a week and a half on the set of that and interviewed everybody. And then after that kind of ran its course, then The Last Crusade was on the next step up. And I did the same thing. I flew to London and spent 2 weeks on the set of The Last Crusade and interviewed Harrison Ford, Spielberg, all of them on that project. And we did a lot of issues where we were covering that. And then it was, the Young Indy Chronicles.
He was the creation of filmmaker George Lucas.
The idea of having the young Indiana Jones go on these adventures, meeting historical figures, coming of age at the turn of the century, fascinated me.
I did a lot of coverage on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, and it was around that time that I got a call from the head of publishing at Lucasfilm. They said, hey, you've already been doing a lot of coverage of Young Indy and the Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine. We're looking for somebody to write the behind-the-scenes book on it.
I will take the book now.
What book?
Honestly, it was. I was asked to write a book for young readers more than anyone, because they really wanted to appeal to young readers.
Use it as a journal or diary. Write down anything that interests or strikes you.
Thank you, Father.
So I said, sure. So I spent my days working on the fan clubs, Star Trek and Lucasfilm, and I'd go home for dinner and come home at night and back to the office, and I'd work till midnight 1 writing the Young Indy Chronicles book, and they had wanted to have me fly over to Africa. They were going to be doing the filming over there, and they thought that would be a good place for me to kind of get a feel for what they were doing. It was the Teddy Roosevelt episode.
Yeah.
And they also were looking at Prague, maybe me going to Prague to do that. And at this point, I had so much going on my plate, and I had just had a newborn baby that I had to help my wife take care of, my little boy. So they said, well, I'll tell you what, we'll set you up with interviews over the phone with everybody. You can ask the questions, and we'll do interviews. And then they sent me all kind. I must have 4 hours of footage they sent me of just being on the set in Africa and in Prague.
That's awesome.
And I got to sit there, and I still have those VCR tapes somewhere of just kind of behind the scenes, just watching them film Young Indy, both in Africa and Prague. And that was what I did. Instead of actually going there, I was able to kind of get a feel for what it was like to be on the sets at that time.
So you're telling us that there's a documentary that could be made with all these tapes.
I'm telling you what, this is footage that nobody has ever seen. I'm telling you. I mean, it was shot specifically for me.
Wow.
Just for me to write the book, so I could have a feel for being on the set when I couldn't actually be there. So, it's I know I've never seen it anywhere else because it's all, raw footage of just being on the set.
Well, if you need someone to help you digitize those things, I'm happy to
You know what? I might do that someday. That's not a bad idea. I mean, if nobody's ever seen it.
Part of the reason we're even just doing this podcast is like, it feels like the show hasn't gotten the attention it deserves, especially with the more recent years, most recent generation. And for you going back though, like when you first just heard the concept, right? I mean, you were a fan of the films. You loved those things. You'd written about Last Crusade. You'd probably written a bit about the River Phoenix prologue in the Last Crusade.
Yep.
But then to hear and the franchise is now moving into television. Like, what was your initial thought just as a fan?
And to add to that, when did you hear this?
Yeah,
because you were covering Last Crusade.
When I had heard about it, probably a year or so before they actually started shooting. I got word that they were going to be doing a television series based around a young Indiana Jones. And at first I thought it was just, Indy at, 17, 18 years old. But then it was revealed to me that they were going to show two different time periods in his life. One when he's a little kid.
Corey Carrier plays young Indy at the age of 10.
I'd like to be an archaeologist.
Whose first adventure is exploring the ancient tombs of Egypt with Lawrence of Arabia.
And another when he's a little bit older.
Sean Patrick Flannery is young Indy at the age of 16.
I like the fact that Sean has a slightly innocent, naive quality, full of idealism and willing to take on the world.
And I loved the idea right from the very beginning. It seemed weird to me, though, because I thought, how do you do Indiana Jones without Harrison Ford? And I thought, as a little kid, I could see them casting somebody, he doesn't have to actually look like Harrison Ford. But, I was wondering how they were going to pull it off with a young actor playing a young Indy without Harrison Ford. And so that was the only concern I had, is could they pull that off?
Now that you don't have your treasure, what will you do?
Go back to America, go to the University of Chicago. I've always wanted to be an archaeologist, so.
More treasure hunting.
But, it was, I was impressed from the moment I heard about it, and I have files upon files of really amazing stuff that they sent me in order to start gearing up about what the show was going to be about and where they were going to be shooting and who the historical figures were that they were going to be doing in the show. I did interviews with George Lucas talking about it. And, what really I liked about it was because this was kind of a special project for George. Education has always been, something he's been very passionate about. And he wanted this show not only to entertain, but to teach kids a bit about history.
Those who forget the lessons of history are doomed to repeat it.
And that's why there were so many, famous historical figures that popped up in episode after episode, so that, George could say to people, well, here's who this is, or here's who that is. And, he tried to stay faithful to who those historical figures were. And so I liked the concept from the very beginning. And it was kind of interesting because I was introduced right away to Rick McCallum, who was who was producing the whole show for George.
It makes history fun, and it's an experience that families can enjoy together, and that's very rare.
Rick was the man on the set. I mean, he had his hand in everything that show had to do, and I talked to him regularly with questions about this or questions about that, and if he didn't know, he'd go find out from George and get back to me. So it was a real thrill that when I was at Lucasfilm and they announced to me that Rick was going to also be the producer on the Star Wars prequels, I thought, well, hallelujah, I already know Rick. We've worked together for almost 2 years now together.
Well, the very first time that George ever discussed his concept of a digital future for the cinema and television was in 1989. And I'm even amazed now how precise that vision actually was about what he wanted to achieve.
So this was awesome that there was already a producer that I knew and I could work with. So yeah, it was a it was a fun thing to be involved with, and those were it was a stressful time, but it was also a really amazing time, and I can't tell you how excited I was to watch the first episode when it aired.
Yeah, what I love about your book is how much into detail about the pre-production stuff you even talk about. I mean, as you say, it was a book geared towards the younger reader, but you really do get into kind of the nitty-gritty in a wonderful way, and just hearing George talk about like how much, months of research that he did, and the research team at Lucasfilm did, and before they even started thinking about stories into the show. And it comes across so well in the show itself. It's like the level of historical accuracy is wonderful. It
really is, and that's one of the things that I was really most impressed was how down to the how they spoke, the language, down to the automobiles, the cars, the costumes, and then they gave me a list of all the historical figures that would be covered in each episode, and so I kind of had to do my own homework. I had to go pull books, and this was at a time when the internet wasn't as relevant as it is today. So I'd go to the library. I checked out books on all the historical figures they gave me, different characters who he was going to be meeting somewhere along the way. And I loved it. It's funny because in the beginning, one of the criticisms of the show that I would get from time to time from fans was, well, it was kind of boring. It was slow. It wasn't. They were expecting, an Indiana Jones movie, which was, nonstop thrills and chills and, all kinds of stuff. And I said, well, no, this is a different kind of Indiana Jones. There is that from time to time, but this is a more thoughtful, more intimate kind of view of Indy's growing up and raising. And actually, I remember one of the things that, because I spoke to him over the phone, I did an interview with him, was the actor, and you'll have to forgive me that I don't remember his name right off, the actor who played Indy's dad in the show. And he did such an amazing, his accent sounded just like Sean Connery. I mean, he was really very believable as a younger version of Sean Connery.
I love him too. That's Lloyd Owen is the actor's name.
That's it, Lloyd Owen. Yep.
He's on Lord of the Rings now, for people who
That's
are
right.
following his career.
You shirked every duty, dodged every problem.
Fine, well, at least I admitted it. Why can't you?
Took the easy way out, ran away every time.
Go on, just for once in your life, admit that you were wrong.
Go to your room.
No, Father. I'm not 10 years old anymore.
You do as I say, son. This instant. Go to your room.
And you not only did you interview Lloyd Owen, but you also interviewed the three characters who played Indiana Jones in this series. You interviewed Corey Carrier, John Patrick Flannery, of course, but then also George Hall, who played the 92-year-old, I believe, 92-year-old Indiana Jones. Right. Which is a bit of a historical relic now because they've since cut those old Indy bookends from the series itself. But
I was sorry to see them do that too, Peter, to be honest, because I really liked George was a wonderful man, and I loved talking with him, and I liked the opening and endings with him as the old Indy, and I always wondered what happened to his eye, that he had the eye patch, but he's older than the old Indy that we see now in the Dial of Destiny.
Yeah.
Why aren't you kids in class?
This place is boring, man.
Why, some of the greatest adventures of my life are sitting in this museum.
Maybe it's cool for you, dude, but we think it stinks.
Hold on.
Yeah, I when they did that, I was really sorry to see them do that because I think it loses a little bit of something, and I wish they wouldn't have done that.
Well, I mean, on the benefit, we just discovered yesterday that someone has been re-editing the original versions together on YouTube. So
good for them.
Yeah, the original cuts are finding new life, I guess, and it is interesting to see it because I only ever grew up with it as the made-for-TV movie edit versions. So
That's right.
It's fascinating to see it. with the original Old Indy bookends in there.
Oh yeah, I love the Old Indy bookends. So if I had my druthers, I'd have that added back in.
How did you find talking to like 3 generations of Indiana Jones on the TV series? Like all of them are trying to connect to Harrison Ford, but also they're actors. They need to do their own thing. Like how did you find that?
I'll tell you what, Corey was cute. He was, he thought it was so cool that he was playing a young Indiana Jones, and I really liked him. He was a neat, interesting little kid. And I know he was thrilled to be playing a young version of Indiana Jones.
The world's gone crazy, woman. First, Miss Seymour locked me in my room, but then I escaped and nearly fell from the rooftops. Sean
was also a fantastic guy, and he, for me, I thought he was the most realistic of all of them. You know, he really cared about the show, and he wanted to do a good job, and he wanted fans to believe that, yes, he was a young Henry Jones Jr., and so, he had some of the most difficult things to do in the show.
Hey, what? We have your colonel up here! Stop shooting! Oh, yeah, Einstein! Beef!
You don't have to get insulted. It's not our fault they didn't tell us the plan.
Of course I'm insulted! How dare you be so unprepared? It's an utter disgrace!
It's like kidnapping my father.
And then, of course, George, it's funny because he was just kind of like just another job, but he was proud to be able to play Indy at an older age, but it wasn't as awe-inspiring for him as it was for Corey and Sean. But what I loved about it is that they showed Indy at all these different ages. And then, of course, we had the one episode, I think it was called, Mystery of the Blues, where Harrison Ford actually played Indy with the mustache and beard, which, I never, be honest, as I had been working on this whole thing, I never thought they would actually get him to do a guest appearance on the show. That just never seemed that would be possible. So when that happened, I was really amazed. And, they shot that up around his ranch in Wyoming. So it was easy for him to do it. And it was kind of a favor to George, you might say.
Well, things can't always be the way you want them to be. But sometimes they are.
In your book, you discuss at length Sean Patrick Flannery's efforts to emulate Harrison Ford. And to me, that casting is like Ewan McGregor quality in the prequels. Casting a prequel actor to play an older actor that we know, having it feel right.
Yeah,
I was curious if you had a chance to ever speak to him after you interviewed him for the book, and if you got any additional insights or if you had anything different to say after he had played the character for a few years.
Unfortunately, I never did get to speak to him after the book. My path never crossed with his, and we never did anything later down the line in the Fan Club magazine with him. So I regret that, because I would love to catch up with him today and just sit down and chat about, his memories and thoughts about being young Indy and such. But no, I never did. But it was an important job to him, and I remember thinking the weight of this show is really resting on his shoulders, because Corey was just a little boy, and he could get away with playing Indy in any way he really kind of wanted to. But Sean, he had to show some of the characteristics of the older Indiana Jones, and he had to make us believe that, okay, we could see 20 years from that time that he was playing Indy, that we could imagine Harrison Ford being Indy. And he had a lot of pressure on him.
Get back to Cairo. Get us some transport to England. Boat, plane, anything. Meet me at Omar's. Be ready for me. I'm going after that truck. Oh, I don't know. I'm making this up as I go.
Oh, make it up as you go. Oh, boy, that's great advice. What if you get kidnapped by bandits? How can I rescue you if I don't know what you look like? I'll think of something. I came here to find the agents that were sent here. And you're going to tell me where they are. I'm going to blow your head off, understand? Does it come into port anywhere between here and Java?
Port Said, Suez, Bombay.
When's the next boat?
7 days.
We can't wait that long.
Where's the train station? When we get to Singapore, I'll find a ship that I can work on headed for London. And then to America.
This is crazy.
Why quit the partnership now?
It was never about a partnership, Remy. It was about us being friends.
I remember somebody telling me after the fact, after the series has ended, that he wasn't real keen about talking about Indiana Jones Chronicles. That it kind of wasn't. I think he was kind of soured by the fact that the show didn't take off and last. But then he like anything, you start to look back at your life and the nostalgia and what happened, and things kind of changed, and then he became much more interested in talking about it. But there for a while, I remember people at Lucasfilm telling me that Sean really wasn't that interested in talking about Indiana Jones.
It is fascinating. I wonder if you could talk, because you wrote the book in 91, so the show was still like working on its first season, which even at the time was only meant to be 6 episodes. It was a very short first season. What was kind of the attitude? I mean, obviously everyone's excited about the new show and it's classic stuff, but like, what was kind of the attitude that you could glean about the hopes, the aspirations for the show? Was the feeling that like, this is going to be Indy now for the next few years, or like how was that kind of atmosphere like at Lucasfilm?
The atmosphere at Lucasfilm was everybody was excited, but they were all trying to prepare me for the fact that this was not like the movies. Yeah, they wanted to be very specific to me that this was a different kind of Indiana Jones. This wasn't one thrill ride after another like we've seen in the movies, and so. That was the one thing that everybody tried to emphasize to me, that, don't watch this thinking you're going to sit down and watch another movie of Indy every week, because that's not what it was.
You are in Benares, where all the world's religions come together. Indy? The ancient Greeks and Romans and Egyptians believed that there was a god for peace and one for war, a god for birth and one for death, a god for everything. Then, the Jewish people decided that there was only one God, and the Christians declared that Jesus Christ was the son of this God.
And so I was prepared for it when I saw my very first footage. I mean, I saw early footage when I was out at the ranch before it ever aired, and then the first time I actually saw a finished episode, I was watching it on my own TV. But that was the kind of thing that everybody at Lucasfilm kind of gave me a heads up to say, this is Indiana Jones, but this is not the movie Indiana Jones. And so I was prepared to watch something that was very different. And I know for some people, that was the thing in the beginning there. That was the thing that kind of, because there'd only been 3 movies, and the people were kind of like, well, this doesn't seem like Indiana Jones. This is, it's a different Indiana Jones. And I remember there was some criticism in the beginning of that.
Winston Churchill will be there.
Isn't he in France?
He's on leave, I imagine. Brilliant mind. Remarkable military strategist. His judgment is not always sound, of course.
Certainly not about women's suffrage.
A great many people were wrong about women's suffrage, including the suffragettes.
Oh.
But who's Winston Churchill?
Didn't you agree with women's suffrage, Miss Seymour?
I certainly don't believe that throwing stones and burning down politicians' houses is the right way to prove your fitness to take part in the government of the country.
Until women did those things and went to prison and nearly died for their beliefs, no one took any notice.
But was it the right kind of notice? My dear young lady.
Please don't call me that. I'm not a dear young lady, yours or anybody else's. I am a woman, and as an intelligent woman, I have a right to vote.
You're covering Lucasfilm at this time. When would you say it really started to turn? When did your contacts really give you the sense that we kind of know the show is not working? This is not the future, and we're moving on to other things?
Well, I would say, 6 months into it, I think they were aware that this was not getting the kind of reviews and ratings that they had hoped it would get. So it wasn't that long after the show came on, and there was, several episodes that had aired that I started kind of getting the idea that, it was iffy whether this thing would go on for very long or not. And I was just happy that that they did as many episodes as they did, because to me, it was an interesting look back into the life of Indiana Jones. And I know that George Lucas, it was a passion project for him. And he wanted to, and I believe that Carrie Fisher helped him write some of it too.
Why don't we just sell ourselves our illusions? Life is a little bit easier if we don't always look at the hard truth.
Yeah. One credited, and then she did a big rewrite on Daredevils of the Desert, I think it was.
That's right. Yep, that's what it was. And, that was kind of cool. George trusted Carrie Fisher. And so, and it had almost I remember some people would tell me as they watched it, it almost had a PBS Masterpiece Theater kind of feel to it at times.
I fear that you are using the privilege of charming women everywhere and changing the subject.
It didn't seem like a network kind of show. It was more like a PBS show, a Masterpiece Theater type of project. And
it's so funny. It's so funny that you mentioned PBS, because arguably it would have been so much better on PBS. It would have. It's who knows? I doubt the ratings would have been much better, but it's it would have fit in very well with kind of that PBS.
It would have fit in very well. Maybe people might have expected it not to be a action-thrilled Indiana Jones movie if it was on PBS. That might have given them a little idea that, hey, this is going to be a bit more cerebral, a little bit more historical, a little bit slower moving, kind of a history, a background of this character and the famous people he met along the way.
Yeah.
And so, I was never ever personally, I was never disappointed in the show. I disappointed that not everybody loved it as much as I did, but I was, I always loved every episode. I thought there was something, like the Mata Hari episode. I love that show.
That, my dear Henri, is the infamous Mata Hari. She is a scandalous so-called performer.
She's an artistic dancer, my love.
Dancer, my eye.
I don't have, my memory's not so good, so I don't remember the names of each of the episodes, but I remember them by who was on the show, and such. But that and the Teddy Roosevelt episode, I loved it on the safari in Africa.
I said no more! You killed enough! No more! That's enough! No more!
Quite right, too. Absolutely right, Henry.
And I like the, I was a little more partial to the Sean Patrick Flannery episodes than I was the Corey Carrier ones, but what I loved about Corey's episodes that we got to see Indy's mom and dad. And that made those special for me, especially the ones when they went to Egypt and such. Those were, I thought, really well done episodes. And I loved being able to see Indy's dad as a young man. I thought that was interesting for them to flesh him out a little bit more on who he was in the past.
Junior, the nation-state grew out of the city-state, which realized itself through conquest and expanded through colonization. Think of Athens, think of Sparta. The logical result was empire. Think of Alexander, think of Rome. Now, what just happened in Europe was that the German Empire attempted to expand. It wanted territory, colonies, and the only way to get them was through conquest. As a result, the Russian Empire, the British Empire, and the French Republic, which is an empire in all but name, combined to crush it. Russia fell, but Britain and France, with timely American assistance, smashed Germany and restored the balance of imperial power.
I'm watching the one with Pacini right now.
The one with what?
Pacini, or Indy's mom sort of falls in love with the opera singer.
Oh, yes.
It's a great episode for her, and that actress is so wonderful. I wish we had been able to see her in more things.
And, I don't even know what she's done since then, or if she's out there doing things that are running on my TV or in the movies or something. I've lost contact with her as what she's doing.
Yeah, it seems like her last credit was, I believe, in 2002 on something, and I think she's kind of fallen off the map, or maybe doing theater work or something like that.
Yes,
but
yes,
at
exactly.
least nothing that gets credited. Hopefully, we'll be able to track her down, though. It would be a really fascinating
Dan, if
interview.
you do, let me know, because I would love to watch an episode of your podcast where you interview people like her.
Yeah, it would be great.
And get her feelings about it all these years later. What does she think about this, and the fact that it's on Disney Plus now, so there's a whole new audience and a whole new generation that will be introduced to the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles that weren't even born when the show came on.
And what's special about her is she's playing a character that we've all imagined, but no one else has ever played. Yeah.
That's right.
Have I been so transparent?
He has been transparent.
He wants me to go away with him.
What?
Run away. He wants me to live with him. He wants me to take a train with him tonight.
What was your answer?
I couldn't answer.
You love him?
Yes.
That's right. That's the cool thing about it, is that was the first time we got an idea of really who Indy's mom was. You're right. I mean, we obviously had Sean Connery as his dad, but we had no idea what Indy's mom was like. And I thought they did a good job of fleshing her out on the show.
I agree. I only wish we could have seen more episodes, because I imagine there was like some future episodes where you would have seen her and the father, Henry Jones, like kind of dig into his like obsession with the Grail more, because that's something we don't see in the series. Like in Last Crusade, Indy is like,
This is an obsession, Dad. I never understood it. Never. Neither did Mom.
And then Sean Connery's like,
oh yes, she did. Only too well.
What does that mean? Like, let's see
that. You're right, Peter, on that specifically. That would have been fascinating to go back and see where that all began, and how the kind of dialogue he had with Indy's mom about his obsession with that and such. I know I never got to read, but there were several scripts that had been written when the show stopped, and I would love to. Now I would love to be able to read those scripts and see what might have happened. I think there were 3 or 4, they said, finished scripts they had at the time the show ended. So obviously there were more adventures that they never got a chance to make.
Yeah, it's I mean, in the classic George Lucas tradition, they like wrote so much before they even started filming, and my understanding is they had at least like 2 more seasons worth of at least ideas or like strong treatments done. And
they had treatments done for a season or 2.
Yeah.
I mean, he obviously had to know where the show was headed, where it was going to go, how it was going to eventually, meet up with the Indy that we see in the movies. So yeah, he did have those. He had those for quite some time ready, But as far as completed scripts, I think there were 3 or 4 that I was told that were sitting there ready to go, and nothing ever came of them.
Yeah, we're gonna hunt them down. That'll be
there you go. The lost scripts of Young Indiana Jones.
It's interesting too, because Young Indiana Jones doesn't just end when ABC decides it ends. It carries on in numerous different iterations. With your efforts on the fan club, you mentioned this earlier. Like Sean Patrick Flannery wasn't too keen to do interviews after the show, but like, what was the fan club's kind of interaction with the show as time went on? Whether it's the 4 made-for-TV movies that were produced over the next 2 years that aired on the Family Channel, or even just like the re-edits that were done, in the late 90s, where they filmed new footage, new interstitials to add into the show.
I think you shouldn't go.
Since when do I have a choice?
Last night I had a dream.
Yeah, well, at least you got some sleep.
The dream was about you. I saw you in a place surrounded by water. Then the water turned to blood. It became a whirlpool. You were sucked into it.
Like, what are your memories of those times?
We tried to make more. I wanted to do some more coverage on Young Indy even after the fact, but we were moving into a time period where there was buzz and talk about new Star Wars movies, and people wanted to see more Star Wars, and so we tried to gear the focus of the fan club more towards that.
Sure.
And because every issue that I did something that wasn't Star Wars as the main coverage or the cover of it, there would always be a slew of people sending us letters saying, well, that was good, but when are you going to get back to Star Wars? You know, there's still lots of people that have never been interviewed that we want to see interviewed, and, well, you know, do more coverage of Star Wars. So we kind of got pressured a little bit by trying to do more Star Wars coverage as we moved along. I wanted to do more Young Indy stuff, but and I don't know, I think we had three covers that were Young Indy. I think three, I can't remember. But I think we had three covers of the Lucasfilm Fan Club magazine that had Young Indy on the cover. I know there was one where we had both Sean and Corey on the cover. Then there was one where Sean was riding a horse. And maybe there was two. I don't know. I can't remember now. That was like another time. That was in like another time. It was so long ago, you know.
And as I recall, it was like 96 or so. You changed back over to the Star Wars fan club. Am I misremembering that? I think yeah.
Yep, that was about the right time, because that's when the prequels were getting made. They were being announced. We knew that was coming down the pike.
Yeah.
And Lucasfilm really, and I'd be honest, you know, I mean, I knew once we changed the name back to the Star Wars official fan club that we'd probably get a lot more members in the club. So it helped the fan club grow more when they knew that there was new Star Wars coming, and this was the place to find out all about them.
What are the questions that you have about the Young Indy? Like things maybe you didn't know or weren't able to learn at the time? If you were listening to this podcast, what are the things you would love to get answers to that maybe you haven't heard?
Kind of what I mentioned about the lost scripts, you know. I would like to know from George, quite frankly, where he had planned to go, where he wanted to go down the line.
Akator? He said that?
Yeah.
You're sure?
That's what he said. He said Akator.
Conquistadors called it El Dorado. Francisco de Orellana disappeared into the Amazon looking for it in 1546. I almost died of typhus looking for it myself.
How many more episodes would he focus on Corey, and how many would he focus on Sean? And so I think more than anything for me is, well, what were his plans? Where was Indy going to go? Who else was he going to meet from history that we never got a chance to see? And I think that, for me, would have been most fascinating. You know, back in those days, I would sit down and just spend days thinking of what questions to ask each of these people, including George. So, you know, I got a lot of things answered back then. But for me, I think more than anything, I'd like to know where would have it gone? Who would he have met? You know, what other famous people would his path crossed, you know, somewhere along the way? And that I would have been really fascinated to know who George had planned to introduce us to that we never got the chance to see.
No defined last words, Dr. Jones?
I like Ike.
I think one of the best parts about fan clubs back then is how much like exclusive, not only content, but exclusive merchandise would be on the fan clubs as well. I know you've spoken about like some of the prequel era exclusive stuff. Was there any, because I know Young Indy had quite an impressive marketing push at the time. Was there any sort of exclusive fan club stuff that you were able to put out, or was it...
Yeah, we did. We did posters. We did patches.
Nice.
We had several items that were exclusive Young Indy things. You know, I've got a file cabinet that I had in my office back in those days. I've got a massive file. In fact, I was just looking at it, I don't know, 2 months ago, just for the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Lots of lots of letters that Lucasfilm sent me showing, you know, talking about the show, and a whole thing of photographs that I had been sent from the show, a brochure that kind of showed all the different places around the world. It was kind of like the Indy map we see in the movies, and it showed everywhere that the Young Indy series was taking place. Yeah, it's like a a treasure trove of stuff that I got to go back into because, I've been sharing a lot of some of the stuff from my past on my social channels, and you guys just gave me an idea. I need to pull that file and look through there because there is some stuff in there, and there's pictures nobody's ever seen that I would love to kind of share with people now that there's, now that we have the internet really full force, because back then there wasn't such a thing. And, but yeah, there's a lot of stuff that I would like to pull and share with people again.
I'll tell you, I think for me, I think for us, I feel like we're like archaeologists. We're trying to uncover information about young Indiana Jones, and it's not something like Star Wars where there's Wikipedia pages up the wazoo. There's very little, certainly reliable information available. So when I hear something about a file cabinet filled with young Indiana Jones information, this is like the X-Files. The answers are in there.
It is. Well, I'll have to share some with you because
that'd be awesome.
Not only do I have files of stuff on Young Indy, but I have files and stuff on The Last Crusade as well, because that was the big project that we were working on right after Willow. We went, head first into The Last Crusade, and so I have got so much material. I remember when we went to the set of The Last Crusade, everybody had that patch with the logo on it. And so I asked them, I said, can you tell me who produced those for you? And Lucasfilm sent me the name and number for that person. And we had a bunch of them produced and were able to offer them to fans through the Fan Club magazine. With Young Indy, there was some really cool stuff that I couldn't use because there was just not enough room for me to use it all in. And, I was always feeling pressured, not by Lucasfilm, but by the fans to more Star Wars, more Star Wars, more Star Wars. So, and now I kind of wish I'd done more on Young Indy because I think it's refreshing to me to now watch these episodes. I hadn't seen them in years until Disney Plus had them. And I haven't yet to sit down and watch every one of them again, but I have caught several of them now, and it brings back so many memories of working on that book and through the fan club and interviewing people and getting to go out to Skywalker Ranch to talk to George about Young Indy. And, of all the projects that George has worked on when I was involved with the fan club, I would say that the one I saw the most sparkle in his eye and the most interest was Young Indy.
My main interest in school and ever since has been cultural anthropology and sociology and related social fields, and so my take on art is more culturally oriented, and I look at art as sort of a way of judging a culture and understanding not really what it looked like or anything, but what the people were thinking and what the people were feeling and what was going on at a particular time.
This was an important project for him because it brought together, history, education, the entertainment. This was something that he watched over every aspect of it. So it was really an important project for him, and it wasn't anybody else's idea. It was George's idea, and he really wanted it to work.
I have beautiful, pristine yellow tablets ready to go. Nice fresh blocks and pencils. I'm all set. All I need is an idea.
I mean, I think it's super telling too that like he self-financed so many additional episodes even after ABC was like the ratings are too low, we're just going to bury the show. He just kept pushing for it to be produced, for not just for the 4 made for TV movies, but carried on with it too. And it seemed like had he not even sold the company, we might even be seeing a Young Indy something works even now.
I think so. Well, and I'll be honest with you, I'm still not. I wouldn't surprise me one bit if we saw, whether it's live action or animated, if Disney went back and did a Young Indiana Jones series for Disney Plus, because you really can't. Harrison Ford has already said, obviously, this was his last. And to be honest, I don't want to see any more of Harrison Ford's Indy. I think they ended it properly and let it be that, and just let that be. But there's still a lot of his early adventures when he was young whether that's Corey Carrier's age or whether that's Sean Patrick Flannery's age, that I could definitely see them doing a live action or even an animated show for Young Indy. So I think there's a greater chance now, to be honest, of seeing something like that developed in the next year or two on Disney Plus. And sadly, I don't know, but George wouldn't have his hand in it quite like it would have been had he still owned the company.
Yeah.
But
because that's definitely something that gets lost in a lot of shuffles. But your book does a great job of highlighting is just how involved he was in this show. Like, I think for some fans out there, they just think George didn't really do anything between 83 and 96 when he starts on episode 1. And I'm just like, no, he was incredibly involved, not only with Young Indy, but also, with Willow, with the Indiana Jones films itself, with Radioland Murders. It's like, he's a very active producer. He's not one of these studio executives who just says yes to a paycheck and then goes away to sip wine on his yacht or whatever. It's like
Well, and it's interesting, this time period, specifically this time period that I started doing the fan club, that time period between, when after Jedi, when George was able to start looking at other projects he wanted to do that weren't Star Wars.
Yeah.
And that's why, Tucker was the man in his car. That was one of those projects he wanted to do. And, the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles and Radioland Murders. And, they may not have been as exciting as Star Wars, but this was a time period when George was able to kind of actually pursue some projects he really wanted to do because, for all we knew, he was done with Star Wars. I mean, there was no guarantee after Jedi that there was anything new for Star Wars. There wasn't any guarantee. And in fact, for the longest period of time, I was kind of convinced that, because I would interview George. Several times I interviewed him, and every time I would go out to Skywalker Ranch and meet him in his office, I never let an interview go by that I didn't say, well, anything you can tell us about new Star Wars movies?
Our meeting was not a coincidence. Nothing happens by accident.
And he said, well, I intend on getting back to him at some point. But, it was... When was that? I don't know. Is that 2 years from now, 5 years, 10 years? And he couldn't tell us. So at some point, I kind of got to thinking that there wasn't anything new for Star Wars. So it was these kinds of projects that he was going to focus on. And I was happy to have a TV series around Young Indy as opposed to to having nothing about Indiana Jones. Because, in all honesty, really, I'm a Star Wars fan. I love Star Wars, but I got to admit, I've always been a history buff, and Indiana Jones has always held a special place for me. And I would say, some might find it blasphemous for me to say this, but I think I'm more of a fan of Indiana Jones than Star Wars. So Dial of Destiny, I absolutely loved it, and I'm got to go back and see it again. And Young Indy was right up my alley. So I'm glad that we got more Indy. I'm glad I guess what I'm saying is I'm glad The Last Crusade wasn't the last Indy.
Let me ask you this, since now the audience has this chance to go watch it on Disney Plus for the first time. You've already mentioned the Mata Hari episode. You've mentioned the Teddy Roosevelt episode. What are the other episodes you would tell someone to go watch these? These are the must-watch ones. You should watch now that you can.
Well, I love the I think it was called The Mystery of the Blues, the Harrison Ford one, just because we get to see Harrison playing Indy again. It was a little bit of a different kind of Indy that Harrison played. I'd never imagined him playing a musical instrument like he was in that episode, and so it was a little bit different to see him doing that. I think my favorite episode, I guess probably my favorite would have been I really liked the Mata Hari episode. I found that one really intriguing, and the Teddy Roosevelt episode. Oh, what's the one? I'm trying to think of his name now. I should have had my book in front of me. The man who got lost in the jungles of
Schweitzer? Albert Schweitzer?
Yeah.
That's it. Yep. Albert Schweitzer.
What does he mean, pay?
Here, when two tribes go to war, it is a rule that each side pays the other compensation for the men that are killed.
They place a currency value on human life? That's barbaric.
If you wish to compare barbarities, French sent wave after wave of men up the slopes. The slaughter went on for hours. By the time the French generals called off the offensive, they had lost 30,000 men. So these people can't comprehend 10 men killed. So how do I explain 30,000 French boys lying in heaps on the slopes of the Lingenkop?
Balingi Mongomingi.
What did he say?
He says the Europeans must be very rich to kill 10 men in a battle.
That was a good episode. I mean, I don't know. What are your guys' favorite episodes?
The Schweitzer episode is my favorite, and I also love the Daredevils of the Desert, which I learned today was ghostwritten by Carrie Fisher. So I'm learning things.
Yes, absolutely right.
Yeah, for me, it's Daredevils of the Desert.
You'll need to put somebody into Beersheba to keep a watch over those wells.
Well, I have contacts there, but I'd need to send in somebody special. A trained agent. Somebody who speaks both Arabic and Turkish. Absolutely trustworthy.
I know the man you want. He works for French intelligence in Cairo. He's one of the best. And an old friend.
Get him.
I believe that was the first one I ever watched, actually. I think I had watched one on VHS that was available through my local library back in the day, and that was the first one. And it's just such a glorious episode. I only learned recently, though, it was originally an hour episode that it was Palestine 1917, and then it got expanded later into a full feature because it plays very well, just as a 2-hour one.
Was it Carrie Fisher who did the expansion? Because that would make total sense.
Could be. I'm not.
Yes, it would.
Not super familiar with the backstory there, but I believe it could be that. Yeah.
But you must pay for the water.
Yes, Lord. Anything.
We take one camel.
One camel, Lord. I'm honored.
And the woman.
And the woman.
Now go.
Lord, no. She is lazy. She's the worst of her kind. She's good for nothing. Lord, she brings my life nothing but misery.
Then you'll be happy to be rid of her.
How far behind you are they?
I gave them a sleeping potion. It will be at least another hour before they wake up.
Hour's head start isn't much.
They won't come after us.
Why not?
Because.
Why not?
Because I have their clothes.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true, Daniel. And I also like the Pancho Villa episode too.
That was very good.
I thought that was a good one, and there really wasn't any one of them that I didn't like. There's just some I liked more than others, but and I would say those were the top 2 or 3 that I enjoyed watching. And I got to be honest, I really truly want to sit down and rewatch all of these now that they're available on Disney Plus, because it's literally been years since I got to see some of these, and for me, some of them would be almost be like brand new, because there would be aspects of it that I'm sure I would have forgotten, and it would be like brand new to me again.
It is so wonderful to rewatch them. I mean, I've been doing this lately myself for this podcast, and it's like there's just even though the show can tackle some very heavy topics and deal with the trauma of war or the heartbreak of a breakup or things of all sorts of various genres and various types, but like there's such a lack of cynicism to it, which I know. Yeah, I feel you can only really get from a George Lucas produced project or Steven Spielberg project, but it's like
absolutely they're the two where you would get that that optimistic feel about things. And it's funny because I don't know that I've ever said this, but after I finished that Young Indy book, Lucasfilm came back to me and said, "Hey, we want to do a biography on Sean Patrick Flannery."
Oh.
And they offered it to me to do. And at the time, I mean, the fan club was just all-consuming. We were moving into a time frame with Star Wars prequels. I had a newborn son. I had to say I would love to do it, but I can't. It's just I got too much on my plate right now, and I can't do that. So I had to turn that project down. Sadly, I wished I had been able to do it, because then I would have had another book with them. But the fan club was calling, and I had to put that as my first thing. And I don't know if you noticed, but I was I was the one that finagled getting the fan club ad in the back of that Young Indy book. I said, we got to have an ad for the fan club in the back of that, telling people where they can get more information on Indiana Jones. And so they were like, at first they were like, I don't know if we can fit. I don't know if we'll have an extra page. I says, no, you gotta get a page. I said, you don't need to put a biography of me or who I am or what I am. I said, take that out and put the ad for the fan club in the back of the book. And so they did.
That's what we call synergy marketing these days.
There you go. Absolutely right. That's exactly right.
Oh my God. Well, Dan, I know you got to get going here in a minute, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your upcoming book and the impetus of that.
I'm really excited about that. Like I said, I was a little too anxious to show the cover because I loved it, and it's not coming out until first quarter of next year. But it's been a joy to write. I still am writing. I'm in the process of writing it right now. I've got 3/4 of it done. But it's been painful because, excuse me, it's been, I've had to try to pull all these memories out of my head because it's not just about Star Wars and Star Trek. There were other projects I worked on, like Lord of the Rings or Back to the Future. And so that's why I've been going through all my files, because I'm going through them and meticulously pulling out things like, oh yeah, that's right, I forgot about that, and I've jotted down a note, about something that should be mentioned. And that's where I discovered this huge file on the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. And it's such an amazing thing because there's so many cool things in there that I'll have to share them with you guys sometime. Maybe we can do another podcast down the line. I'll pull some of the coolest things that I've found in that file because nobody has seen these things. And I can pull them up and show them to you guys, and you can see all these cool things that have been lost to the ages, actually. But the book is a special project for me. It's the hardest thing I've ever done because it's literally me having to pull these memories out of my head.
And for the listeners out there, like, this book is an autobiography a fair way to describe it?
Yes.
Or is it, okay, yeah. So it's all about your life.
It's a memoir about how I started and how I ended and where I'm going now.
And, not just the Lucasfilm Fan Club, but as you mentioned, you also ran, like, the Lord of the Rings Fan Club for a little while. And then, you have a great story about auditioning for Willow, which I just love.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
you've been around so many, not just George Lucas, but also, like, Gene Roddenberry and so many of these people throughout the years. And you were working with Ashley Eckstein on her universe for a few years. And
it's like, for 10 years, I helped Ashley launch her universe, and I worked on it with her until we sold it to Hot Topic, and was instrumental in helping her put on the fashion shows that are held every year at San Diego Comic-Con. And that's coming up in the next week or 2 weeks. Yeah. There's a San Diego, and there's a new Her Universe fashion show. So Ashley's one of my dear friends, and she's one of my favorite people that I've ever worked with.
Yeah. So this book would have just be chock full of amazing stories and
absolutely lots of cameos. Lots of cameos of people, very famous people that come in and out of this story.
Amazing.
And Anthony Daniels has a big part in it too, I might add.
Do you have a title for the book yet, Dan?
Yeah, it's called Size Matters Not.
Perfect.
Yep.
Amazing. So if listeners want to get in touch with you, like what's some of the social media handles for you or websites there?
Well, I'm under the Dan Madsen on Twitter, Madsen8973 on Instagram. They can find me just as Dan Madsen Official on Facebook. Those are the 3 platforms that I'm currently on, and that's how they can find out about they want to follow me anywhere on those. I keep updating people not only with what's coming, but I have lots of memories that I share on those social channels about things that I worked on and pictures that I have never shown people before and such. So that's the best way to find out what I did and what I'm doing.
Awesome. Well, fantastic. Well, we'll wrap it up right there. We hope we can have you back on the show sometime. This has been so much fun.
I would like to, and I'll bring some stuff to show you from Young Indy and really, I have to say, this was fun because I don't get to talk about Young Indy ever.
Exactly.
It's always Star Wars. So, I was delighted for you guys to come to me and say, hey, let's talk Young Indy because, it's it's especially relevant now that it's on Disney Plus. And I'm not kidding. I mean, they literally now have a whole new audience that gets to see these, and I really hope that it takes off for them.
Thanks so much, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Daniel and Peter. I really appreciate it.
That concludes our interview with Dan Madsen. If you want to find us on the socials, you can search for Young Indy Pod on Instagram, where we'll post behind-the-scenes images from the series and info about upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the show, please rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or subscribe to us wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, for Daniel Noah and myself, Peter Holmstrom, keep on adventuring.
Next time on the Young Indy Chroniclers.
We're thrilled to have Mr. Laird Malamed, who is an assistant sound engineer.
Ben, Burt, and George Lucas hired me. Somebody at ABC got nervous. We had to do this emergency screening. This is October of 91. I got to do the temp music. Play it for George. I really think, George, the scene is about this. I want Bob Iger crying. And this is why I went that way. And he's like, that's just an opinion.
He is accurate.
Greatest dismissal.
It wasn't even off-putting. We're guys having a conversation. There's 2 creative people. Yeah, there are 2 creative people here. George is 1.98 of the 2, and I'm 0.02.